Hello, my fellow Americans. 'Tis I, the Rumpled One. The other day, talked about freedom. Well, I've been going through my bookshelves, looking at what books I want to keep and what books I'm going to either sell at a garage sale or donate because I'm running out of room. Anyway, found this book, Fact and Fiction by Bertrand Russell. I always liked Bertrand Russell as an author. I looked through it to see if I wanted to keep it or not, and what did I see? A chapter. The chapter title is, What is Freedom? How ironic, I just made a video about freedom. He says, there are many kinds of freedom. Of some the world has too little, and of others it has too much. But in saying that there can be too much of any sort of freedom, I must hasten to add that the only kind of freedom which is undesirable is that which diminishes the freedom of others. For example, the freedom to make slaves. And then later he says, in its most elementary sense, freedom means the absence of external control over the acts of individuals or groups. It is thus a negative conception, and freedom alone will not confer any high value upon a community. And he ends the chapter with this. What the West professes to stand for fundamentally is the belief that governments exist for the sake of individuals, not the individuals for the sake of governments. It is this principle that is at stake. Now, if you ponder that for a minute or two, you can see how those words can be really twisted by politicians. He says, the belief that governments exist for the sake of individuals, and not individuals for the sake of governments. Well, if that be the case, people like Obama could say, well, if government exists for the sake of individuals, then, we got to do everything that we can for the sake of these individuals, and that means some of you people are going to have to share the pie, like Joe the plumber. But that's really not what it means. But that's what it can be distorted and twisted into meaning. Government exists to protect the individual's freedom. I mean, you have a country. Country has a border. So, the role of government is to protect that border from invasion. Enemies. So, you're protecting the individuals. So, you're existing for the sake of those individuals. Now, within that country, you have a police force. It has to protect one individual from some other individual in that country. Beating them, robbing them, mugging them, stealing their property, is causing general mayhem. So that's why you have the police. So that's a function of government that exists for the sake of the individuals. And then you have a court system. Because if you and I have a dispute, maybe we're arguing about the property line, or maybe you hired me to do something and you didn't like the way I did it, or vice versa, then we go to court and the government will settle this dispute civilly. And that's existing for the sake of the individuals. Once you get past those three things, it's really hard, because then government starts to exist for the sake of itself. Okay, let's look at fire protection. Yeah, that's probably another good one. If fire breaks out, that's helping the individual. Schools. Education. I think most people believe that educating young folks, older folks is good. But then you have to start to sit back and think about it for a minute. Who should pay? Well, you say, well, everybody should pay. Really? What if you don't have any kids? Well, then people will counter, but you got an education. Yeah, but my parents paid. Oh. So, you have to wonder about that. I mean, think about education. You got government involved. You got all these people deciding what to teach, what not to teach. In the beginning, there was reading, writing, and arithmetic. The 3 R's, right? But now, you have all kind of things that have nothing to do with reading, writing, or arithmetic. Then you get high school students that can't read and can't do math when they graduate. Gotten away from the basics. And what's that got to do with freedom? Well, some people, parents, have taken matters into their own hands and said, I'm going to homeschool my kid because I want him to have a good education. Not that government education where they're filling their head with a bunch of nonsense. See, that's freedom right there. But those parents still have to contribute via property tax to the school system. And their kids have to take tests by, that the government issues to make sure that the kids are learning, which is kind of ironic when you think about it. See, freedom is something that exists naturally. I mean, you've seen, if you watch my videos, there's deer comes into my yard. I call it my yard, but really, the deer thinks it's his yard or her yard. And I call it my apple tree, and the deer thinks it's their apple tree. Of course I could shoot the deer or trap the deer, snare it, eat it, which I just might do. But the deer just exist. But see, as people, we just can't exist. I already made the video that it's almost illegal to be alive because you got to jump through so many hoops. Because if you don't, then you're in violation of some law or ordinance. They can then fine you or put you in jail or do both. But the real freedom is what I said before, freedom of the mind. In fact, he even talks about it in the chapter a little bit. He calls it mental freedom. It says mental freedom from a public point of view has 2 branches. On the one hand, a man should not suffer for holding or proclaiming opinions other than those of the government. On the other hand, education should not be such as to make its victim incapable of ever thinking an original thought. And see, that's one of the things that Obama and the Democrats are doing right now. They're saying if you don't go along with what they're saying, you're a racist. Playing the old race card, which is a bunch of hogwash. But in politics, they're free to do that. And the funny thing is if you look at the history of politics in America, what these guys are doing today is very civil and respectful compared to the names that those, that the first, say, 10 or 20 presidents called each other when they were campaigning. I mean, those guys were vicious. But they weren't afraid to debate each other openly. They didn't have teleprompters and all that other crap. I still think the candidates should go on Jeopardy. Or do you think you're smarter than a 5th grader? That would be so telling, but let me get back to the point. Freedom. Now, what freedom do you really want? Really, it's freedom to be left alone. Just not be bothered. Freedom to earn most of what I keep, if not all. I mean, some people think that, I hate paying taxes, and I really think there should be a form called 1040, let me think, they already have a 1040E, 1040, well, anyway, I can't think of a good name for it. But there should be another 1040 form that you tell the government where you want your tax dollars to go. So basically, you take that away from Congress. So for example, if I wanted 50% of my money to go to the military and 50% of my money to go to the interstate highways, that's what I would designate on this Form 1040 when I submit my taxes. And so when my tax bill goes through, they go, okay, half goes there, half goes there, and everybody gets to do that. And that way, programs that people don't want wouldn't get funded. And of course, this would have to be phased in. Maybe the first year we do it, you get to designate 10%. And then the next year, 20%. And all the way up to maybe you get to designate 80, 90, if not 100%. I think that'd be real interesting. They should almost do it as a pilot program where you fill out the form, but it doesn't really go into effect, but then they could collect the data. Only question is, would they be honest about it? Let's just face it, I don't trust government, and chances are you don't either. And that kind of takes away part of our freedom, We're not free to trust, we're suspicious. For good reason. You heard my congressman talk. So what is freedom? My fellow Americans, what is freedom? It's what this country was founded on. It was the basis of this country. But, as Bertrand Russell said, its future is at stake. And that we the people should not exist or do not exist for the sake of government. Wake up, America. Smell the tyranny.